Okay, perfect. So welcome back. Welcome back. We're going to start with a bit of time for questions or clarifications to Sister Brenda. Please just remain in your channel for interpretation and talk in your own language, in the language that you have chosen. Okay, if you want to talk in Spanish or in Italian, sorry, no, in Spanish or in French, just speak in French or in Spanish in your channel, and you will be translated into the different languages. Okay. And please, if you want to talk or ask, remember to press the button of raising your hand. That is in reactions in the group, or the icon of reactions. Hi, Ben. Yes, please. Your question.
The question is somebody going to report from each group, or does people just speak spontaneously from?
No, we are not going to do like a feedback from the group. Only you just keep it that and send us by email the different sharing that you had. Okay, now it's only for questions to Sister Brenda or clarifications that we want about her intervention, about her talk.
Okay. Well, from our group, just to say that there were some very common, the common thing that came through from, there was Pascal Bourdin, Sister Rachel and Willie Tungan in our group. And everybody was interested in getting Sister Brenda to say a little bit more about the distinguishing between counseling, spiritual direction, and a vocational accompaniment. They found the distinctions very helpful and would just like ask her to say a bit more. Thank you.
Would you like me to answer directly, Daniel?
Yes, if you feel.
Oh, yeah, if I can, if I can. Yeah, I think it's an excellent question, Ben, because I think it's, you know, there's a lot of similarities, and then there are some differences. And the main, like the basic thing of similarity between the counseling, the spiritual direction, and the vocational accompaniment is that very often in the session or the conversation, you know, like whether it be counseling or the spiritual direction or vocational accompaniment, this span often touches all aspects of life, right? But for the formator, he or she is focusing on discerning the call and how, you know, like this, the perceived call by the searcher, how that affects like his relationship with God, with others, with himself, with the world around him. So you try to keep it focused on that. It's very like spiritual direction, except spiritual direction is that bit broader. It touches into the internal forum. The vocational accompaniment doesn't touch the internal forum. You know, that is like the person's conscience and things like that. But how the call, you know, how the perceived call is touching into relationships, is touching into work life, is touching into all the different aspects of the person's life. But you hold the focus on what you're really trying to do. I mean, if as a vocation minister, you're using the accompaniment like to move forward in say, in initial formation or later on in formation, then the same thing, how is my trying to live this particular way of life to integrate the values of Jesus Christ, how it affects all the different aspects of my life, right? You know, it'll touch into, basically it touches into relationships with God, with others, with myself, with the world around me as well. Now, I don't know if that clarifies it. I left materials, you know, which does it more in depth. But that's one of the main things, is keeping a focus on, because as a formator, what your role is to gradually reveal the congregation, as it were, to the new member, right, to the searcher, while at the same time, you're also encouraging and challenging the new member to reveal himself or herself to the congregation, so that a mutual discernment can take place. The counseling, as I mentioned earlier, counseling deals basically with the values that the person holds, but they do not touch like the objective value, revealed values of Jesus Christ. They won't necessarily touch those unless the person brings them up themselves. And I did mention that counseling can be remedial, in that it can help the person to recoup, you know, go back into the past, dealing with difficulties that they had coming out of the past. It can help there, or it can also, you know, like life coaching, life skills and life coaching. It can also deal with life coaching, which is more a positive aspect. But the vocation accompaniment, if it touches in, and this is probably something that the vocation minister needs to watch, is that if in the vocational accompaniment you touch into, say for example, there was abuse in the person's life in the past, then you may have to refer the person to deal with that aspect of things. You see what I mean? You mightn't necessarily, if it's not within your own competency to deal with that, you refer the person. And usually vocationers or searchers, they do have a spiritual director as well as the vocational accompaniment as well. I may be presuming here now, but you know, oftentimes they may have their own spiritual director. But the spiritual director is dealing with the as it were, the soul and God, you know, what goes on in the soul and God. And that touches the internal forum, I think, is the main part. Now, somebody else may have more than that they can add to it. I don't know if that answers, Ben, what you were asking.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much, Brenda.
Okay, and if you take a look again at the piece, you know, the long material that I hope you'd be able to access, you'd be able to see it in more depth in that one.
Thank you.
Yes, certainly all that material, we will put it available for everyone. And you know that it will be in English, but you know that easily you can translate it into other languages.
Yeah.
With a Google Translator or that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think, yes,
Sorry, Jan.
Yes, sister, yeah. Yes,
no, I was just going to say is that, like, there are a number of different differences and similarities. You know, I've only just touched on what I would see as the most salient ones, really, the most important ones. Sorry, Jan, excuse me, I cut across you.
No problem. No, I was just, Kevin, I think you wanted to say something, to ask something. Yes, please.
Yes, I did. Thanks, Danny. Yes, Sister Brenda, you made a distinction between the internal forum and the external forum. And I think you said that vocational accompaniment is in the external forum. Could you say a little bit more about that distinction, what it means?
It's just that, like, for example, it doesn't touch the you know, like conscience, you know, the area of conscience. It may, to be honest, Kevin, it may happen that the person moves into something like that, right? But then again, as a vocation minister, if you find it's touching into where they're like, where you'd be moving into the area of conscience, of, you know, what would touch the internal form, like the area of sin, that area, then you'd be asking the person then maybe that they would deal with that with their spiritual director, right? Without moving into it. I mean, if the person brings it up, but you handle it by helping the person to move towards, say, the talk it through with their spiritual director. Because again, as a vocation minister, your work is basically looking at the, you know, the person's response to a call, right? So again, it's something like what I said there to Ben about if you come into difficulties on the psychological end, you know what I mean? If you find that there are maybe some difficulties out of the past for people, that unless you're trained for it, is not to get into that and to direct them to, say, somebody else. So it's the same if it moves into the area of conscience, you know, handling those areas in life, that you direct the person to talk that through with their spiritual director. I don't know now, does that answer it for you? You know what I mean? But again, it's being aware of what your role as vocation director is.
Yeah, I mean, I think one question that people can have is that if you have a conversation with a candidate or a searcher,
Yeah.
Are you bound by total confidentiality in the way that a confessor or a spiritual director or some other people might be? Or can it be shared with others?
Yeah, I think that's important. That's an important distinction, because one of the things I said there was confidentiality where appropriate. Because as a vocation minister, you have a responsibility to the congregation. And that from the very beginning, the vocationer needs to know that there will be aspects that must be shared, you know, because how is the congregation to discern if you don't, you know, if you can't share aspects of what you've learned with the congregation? But that it would mean, as I understand it, Kevin, it does mean that like the vocationer knows this from the outset, right? Like the confidentiality is like, it's absolute in cases, but like for a vocation minister, you have to be able to say, well, is this person suitable? Are they showing signs that they can grow in this vocation? Or are they showing signs that like it just isn't suitable for them? And that has to be shared. I mean, the vocation minister does not make the final decision as to whether a person goes forward or not. It's the leader, you know, so the leader is dependent on the vocation minister to help him in his discernment or her in her discernment. So again, Kevin, what I'd be saying again is clarity about your role and what the role involves. Right? Okay.
Thank you.
I hope that's of help. Yeah, I hope. Was that much?
Malia, would you like to make a question?
I'm Sister Malia Maafu. I'm a missionary sisters of the Society of Mary. My question is, I thank you, Sister Brenda, for all the explanation. I'm still on formation, but I'm kind of very clear to explain for me as a sister still on formation. But my question is, when I look at there are different responsibilities of the counseling, the vocational accompaniment, spiritual direction. My question is it possible that we can only have only one sister or one person that she can accompany us in doing all the three? Or are we going to distinguish them to have only one? Is it possible? My question is it possible to only have one one person to do all the free
necessary-
counseling, vocational accompaniment in spiritual direction.
Yeah.
And my second question is, there's another question. My second question for meeting the vocational accompaniment or counseling or spiritual direction, how often? You mentioned something about the time. Yes, for sure that they will set the time, but how often the time that it can be possible to have a meeting with my accompaniment or vocational accompaniment. Thank you, Sister Brenda.
Thanks very much, Malia. Yeah, I think first of all, sorry, the first question there was about the, one person doing all. That way, like, if I understood the question correctly, it was one person would do all three functions, like as the spiritual director, the vocations director, and the counselor. You'd want somebody very skilled who would be able to do all of them. Do you know what I mean? I think that having to do all three might be a difficult enough one. Sometimes the counselor and the vocation accompaniment can, could, if the person is very well trained in that area, they probably could put those two together. But I do think that the spiritual director would need to be separate from a vocation perspective. I do think that. I think in order for the person to be able to, to have some kind of freedom, they probably would need a spiritual director if you were to put the other two together, the counselor and the vocation ministry, if they went together, I would still think that the spiritual direction should be separate. Now, I don't know, would everyone agree with that? But I think that the searcher would need a little bit of space, and the spiritual direction might be the place where they would need to have it. The other one, that's just my opinion now. I mean, there would be other ways of looking at that, Malia.
Thank you.
The other question you had was how often? Like one of the things would be is once it would be regular, fairly regular, but a lot would depend on the vocation minister and how many people he or she was responsible for. I would be thinking that like maybe once in 2 weeks, if it was regular, could be helpful. If it could be once a week, it would be wonderful, but it would be, I don't know that would always be possible. And it would depend on the number that you would have, the number that you'd have to work with. Once a week would be fairly intense, and you probably would set it for a period of time. It couldn't go on ad infinitum, if you know what I mean. It would be maybe over a period of, once a week over a period of 6 months or 8 months, or once a fortnight over the same kind of period. It would be fairly regular. I think once a month, you see, one of the things, Malia, is that when you get into a conversation with a person where they're actually trying to discern and explore, and things come up that are important for them, the more regularly you have the meetings, the more often you have them, the more the person is able to work with material that comes up. What happens is if there's a long space between one session and another, the person kind of closes back in again, and it takes more time or more effort to get them to open up again to the same level and depth that they had maybe in the previous session. So the more regular, the oftener the meeting, the more like intense the person works, and the more you can move forward with it. If you're doing it less often, it may take more time. But then there may be other ways of interacting with a vocationer like that would help you to get to know the person as well. You know, in ordinary everyday living, if they were, you know, coming to the house or were in the same place as you were, etc. I don't know, am I answering your question?
Yes, so thank you very much. Yes, it's clear. Thank you, sister.
But I have a question from my own, and I think I should play by the same rules, so that's why I rose my hand. My question is about the decision. I mean, I had the experience with a few people that we set up a time, we meet regularly, it's going ahead somehow, but never come that moment to make a decision. Of course, discernment, we know that discernment is not linear. Like you're going to start here and you're going to finish here in that time. You cannot do that. But how can we, in our group, for example, Jose Maria was saying, how can we provoke the response? How can we help the person to make that response that need to do? Because the discernment at the end always needs a response.
Yeah.
Sometimes not making a choice is also a response. But the idea is that the person will make consciously and freely a choice for their vocation. You know? So could you give give a word about say a word about that kind of thing, that maybe that final process, or how can we get there?
Yeah, see, I think Daniel, there, I think you've hit something that's very crucial in today's world. You know, it's often it's difficult enough for, say, you know, searchers to make a decision for one very simple reason. Every choice entails a sacrifice. Do you know what I mean? That, like, if a person is to choose, they're going to close the door to other options. And I don't know what your experience is, but I mean, the bit of experience I would have had in recent times is that you know, sometimes searchers like to keep the option open for as long as possible, you know, and then the time goes by and it's like in Oliver, there's the musical Oliver, and Fagin talks about, I have to think it out again. They come to the edge of the cliff and they look over, and instead of, you know, flying, that they turn around and come back around and start the process again. So it's something like, you know, what the eagle does with the young. You know, they have at some time, you may have to, if you felt that this search has gone on for what, a year, 2 years, and you see it as stalemate, that there's no movement forward in the person, you do try to provoke a situation that says, you know, like talking to the person saying, well, you know, we have come to this point twice, 3 times, 4 times. What do you think that's saying? And then if the person doesn't seem to be able to say, well, I'm scared of making a decision, you know, I don't know what it'll involve. I think I still need to, you know, to take more time. You say, well, you know, maybe we should begin to look at begin to put a time limit on it, so that the person then says, well, no, I'm not going to do it now, or yes, I will try and see how we go. Having given it a bit of time. Now, like, for example, I've known people who were in discernment for 4 years, you know, and finally didn't make a decision, but were asked to see if the person could, you know, try or not, but they pulled back. They weren't going to make that decision at all. So I think it's, in your experience, how long do you think is optimal for a person to be discerning? Now, and I know I know that like everybody is different, you know, that way. But I think as a vocation minister, if you see a person like they're coming back around in a circle, and that's happening, it's happened twice, 3, 4 times, I'd be inclined to confront the person by saying, do you notice what happens? We get to this point, it's happened twice before, and give the concrete examples, and then you come back again. I would kind of do the eagle and the nest, is give a little push and say, you know, do you think it might be time to take a step here? Then, I mean, I wouldn't force it, but I would put it out and see how the person takes it. That's after a length of time. Because otherwise, I don't know, some people won't ever take it. Others do, others keep moving. And you see, again, it's how do you notice in the sessions or the conversations that the person is moving forward? And the way I was saying to you was, if, you know, gradually, say after about 6 months, you notice that the person is gradually learning from the experience of the accompaniment, gradually beginning to sort of maybe take more responsibility for what they say, going deeper with where they're trying to search, then you know that there's a movement. But if it's simply going round in a circle and coming back to the same point, if that happens a number of times, you have to try and, you know, just either put a limit or say, you know, we need, this doesn't seem to be going anywhere for you. Maybe you need to take time away from this discernment in order to see, you know, what you really want. You know, actually asking the person to take a look again. I'd be inclined to do that. Now, I don't know that everybody would, but if a person has been at it for 18 months, you know, to 2 years, that's long enough to know whether you want to go forward or you don't.
Thank you very much.
You know, now that's, I don't know again if that's of help to you, but that would be my honest opinion on it.
Yes. No, thank you. Good. Well, I don't know if somebody else wants to make a question.
Yes, but it's Sister Rachel here from Jamaica, SMSM.
Yeah, Rachel, go ahead. Thank you.
Well, my question to Sister is, from your sharing, Sister, I think if I can hear you properly, that you touch on during the in this accompaniment process, there are open questions and there are closed questions. So can you further, because well, for me, I am new to this ministry, and so I'm interested to learn more. It's very interesting. So and I've also, like, from our counseling, something that I have touched on. So it also come up with there are open questions and there are closed questions. Like, for example, there are questions that you ask that might put off the person, that would not allow the person to share. It's like you just closed off. And there are questions that you enable the person to share.
Yeah.
So can you elaborate more on that, especially identify what type of questions that would like open questions that enables or allow the persons to share or to enter into dialogue? Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. Yeah, I think, I mean, and I think those kind of questions, like knowing the kind of question, is something that you learn gradually as you go along. You see what I mean? You begin to, like, none of us when we start off will know the right questions to ask, you know? But like, I would have found myself, and I mean, the example I'd give there would be is, you know, how do you feel can sometimes be a closed question, because sometimes the person doesn't know what they feel, do you know, that way, in a given situation. And you try then and move in with something like, you know, what did it mean to you to be in that situation? You see what I mean? You try and move in maybe even more on a descriptive, more on in a thought manner, rather than going straight in at the feeling. And then it's trying to help the person to explore, you know, saying, could you help me to understand a little more what was happening? And then the person might go around it again. So you try and listen to what they're saying and pick up some aspect of it again that keeps the exploration going. So like the open question is more, what did that mean for you in the situation? The closed question might be, how did you feel? Now, there will be times when you'll ask somebody how they felt, but sometimes it can be a closed question for people because they won't know, they won't be able to put words on how they actually feel. Okay, so it's Rachel, if you try and see how you can help the person explore a situation or explore what's going on for them. You know, tell me a little more about this, you know, and even people go back over a situation or something that's happening for them, but when they go back a second time, you may be able to go in and ask, you know, for a further clarification on it, etc. But you understand yourself very well that, like, you know, the closed question is a kind of a yes or no. Do you know what I mean? Whereas the open question helps the person to explore the situation a bit further. I don't know now, if it's something more concrete you want, but it's how can I help the person to stay with what's happening and to explore it a bit further.
Okay, thanks, sister.
Okay.
Thank you.
Tim, do you want to come in on that one? The open and the closed question. Tim,
You have to open your microphone.
Your mic, Tim.
Sorry. Only this, I think you can find some good material on open and closed questions, probably by doing a search on the internet. And I think that would give you a lot of examples and a framework to take what Brenda has been talking about, because this is an idea that is not a new one. So there's actually I think quite a lot of material that you might find interesting. Just a search for questions open and closed. And I think a lot of the things that we are talking about here, you could deepen by trying that.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that okay, Rachel?
Yes, sister. Thanks. Thank you too.
Okay.
Thanks for.
Yeah, okay.
Well, unfortunately, I'm going to be very unpopular now because we need to finish. We are well past the time that we said we are going to have. We said 1.5, but it has been so interesting that really it went much further than this. Just to say a big thank you to Sister Brenda for bringing her expertise and her knowledge and wisdom, and it has been really a pleasure to have you here. You can see that we are spread all around the world, but we managed to come together, and it was worthwhile to listen to you. Thank you very much for.
You're very welcome, Daniel. Thank you. You're a great moderator. You do very well.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you also, especially to our interpreters, to Francisco and Carla. They have done a fantastic job as always. But it's very important for us their help, and especially also thank you to Sophie and to Juan Carlos, who are dealing not just with the technical things, but also with the heat in Rome. So it's not easy at all. So thank you very much. And to all of you, thank you very much. Please, the moderators of each groups, do not forget to send us the sharing, okay? And we will pass around. We will make it circulate. And just to remind you that if you're interested, tomorrow at 1 p.m. wrong time, we will have the second seminar, and in the evening at this time, 8:30 p.m. wrong time, and we will have the third session. Okay. Nothing else. Thank you very much to all for your attendance. Great to see all of you. Have a very good day, morning, evening, whatever.
Yes, I'd say so. It must be very different. Yes, thank you very much. Okay, lovely to meet
Okay.
Thank
you.
you very much.
And I wish you every
Thank you.
blessing for the rest of it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank my sister.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye-bye.